Hello, everyone. Before we dive into today's episode, I wanted to remind you that my book, Drummers on Drumming, is available now on Amazon as both a paperback and an ebook. Based on the Big Fat 5 segment of this podcast, where I sit down with my favorite drummers to discuss the 5 records and stories that shaped their approach to the instrument, this book is packed with insights from the drummers who redefined how we think about the modern drum set. You can grab your copy now by checking the link in this episode's show notes or simply searching Drummers on Drumming on Amazon. So thank you for all the support, and now let's get into the show.
Hey, this is Aksel Coe, and I'm Ben's guest on Big Fat 5.
What is up? Welcome back to Big Fat 5, a podcast financially supported by Big Fat Snare Drum. We are back to our regularly scheduled programming with this week's guest, Aksel Coe. I first found him on Instagram thanks to a shout out by our good buddies at Nelson Drum Shop, and I was hooked right away. I say this at the top of the interview, but in case you're about to click on another podcast, I have to say Aksel is the epitome of a modern drummer. You want a drum sound? He can get it for you. Just go to his Instagram and you can find out what I mean. He knows how to manipulate his home recording studio to get basically any vibe. We also start off the chat listening to 4 songs he's recorded over the last few years, and they all sound like completely different drummers. Can't say enough about how big of a fan I am of Aksel's playing. Also, he's a great hang, and with us both originally being Northwest boys, this chat was just fun for me. So if you're looking to start or further your career as a session player, Aksel's insight comes from a very boots-on-the-ground approach, so it ain't no fluff. I hope you enjoy the 5 records that shaped him into the player he is today. Cheers.
Stuck in the same fight, going nowhere. Here we go again. You can let it out, I can take it all.
Dude, you're like the epitome of a modern drummer. I really am obsessed with your sounds, dude, and I'm excited to find out more about it. But I don't really know a lot about your backstory. So are you from Nashville originally?
I've moved around a lot as a kid because my dad was in the Marines. So I was born in North Carolina, but kind of moved around the South and then California. But I grew up outside of Portland, Oregon, in a town called Camas, Washington.
I know exactly where Camas is. Yeah, I'm from Seattle, so yeah.
Oh, sweet. Nice. Yeah. So I spent like ages 8 to 18 in the Northwest. So that's kind of where I identify. Like that. Those are the formative years and kind of where I learned to play music. Stuff. None of my family lives there anymore, but that's kind of like where like home is to me. But yeah, I moved to Nashville about 4 years ago, and I guess 4 years ago is when like I became an official adult and moved to a city on purpose, not for college or family reasons, to like actually do music as a full-time profession. So I feel like as an adult, I'm from Nashville, but as like a whole person, I guess kind of Northwest, kind of Colorado. It's all over the place, to be honest.
Okay. What were you doing before you decided to be a professional musician?
I guess, yeah, I just a kid growing up. I got into music pretty early. I guess middle school was kind of when I started playing. There was kind of a choice between being in choir or being in band. So I was like, well, I think band sounds fun. I saw snare drum as like the easiest thing. Not that I was lazy or anything, but I just didn't really see myself doing music. So and I was too shy to sing or anything. So I looked at the snare and I was like, well, you're just holding 2 sticks and you're only hitting one surface. There's no notes. So and all the drumline guys seemed really cool. So I kind of gravitated towards that, and then now it's my job.
Well, I mean, so from your videos, I mean, I'm looking at your background right now. So that is your studio? Is like a basement in your house, or what's the vibe?
Yep, this is just my house, just like kind of close to Berry Hill in Nashville. For some people will know where that is. But yeah, I for the most part I record just in basements. Since I've been in Nashville, I lived in one other house, and then this house is actually mine. So yeah, it's just an unfinished basement. I don't know if you're going to use the video or not, but just unfinished basement with a lot of acoustic treatment, and that's kind of where I send remotes and track a lot of the videos that I post and stuff. So yeah, I've always had like a good time. I feel like in Portland too, like I would always go to people's houses and they would have these crazy home studios that were just completely decked out basements. So I've always been pretty comfortable in like a non-official studio environment. It's like always been kind of fun to me to learn different rooms and figure out how to make them sound good.
Well, yeah, I mean, like I said at the beginning, your sounds are amazing, so you don't need a, state-of-the-art, quote-unquote. What's the percentage of stuff you get that you remotely record in your studio versus, for lack of a better term, professional studio?
Totally. I'd say right around now it's about 50-50. Before, I really would only ever record remotes for friends if someone needed drums and was living somewhere else. And it was just kind of a novelty of, I have mics set up on my kit. Like, I'll send some stems and you can see what you can do with it. And then obviously the pandemic hit. And I was lucky to have already been recording drums in self-engineering and all of that. So it wasn't a huge learning curve because obviously once the pandemic hit, everybody started having to record remotely. So I felt like I had like a good leg up on that. But I would say in the past 2 years, like it's become like a steady income for me, which is weird because I really do feel like most of the remotes that I record aren't super straight ahead drums. There's always like kind of like I feel like people call me for stuff that's a little bit off kilter, maybe a little dry or dead. So, but yeah, I'd say about 50%, at least of recorded stuff. I mean, obviously I'm a live drummer as well, and I tour a little bit. But yeah, I'd say 50-50 here and then other studios.
Well, let's. Speaking of your recording, and I mean, off kilter, the choices you sent me, they were so different. So it was so rad.
Yeah, I sent you some funny. I could have sent more, but I figured that was a good amount. I'm honestly curious to see what you play because it's all crazy.
Well, the first one is by K.Flay, and my good friend Mike Robinson's been playing with her the last few months.
Right. Yeah, Mike's awesome.
You love Mike. But yeah, so this is the song "I'm Afraid of the Internet" by K.Flay. So let's just play a little bit of that, and then maybe you can just talk about the session, the vibe, all that jazz. But here is K.Flay.
I'm afraid of the internet. I'm afraid of the internet.
Yeah, so this track was recorded right here. Like, you can't see, but my drums are right next to me. So
dude, they sound so good.
I engineered it, but my friend Tommy English, he was the producer. So he's out in LA, and he made my drums sound huge. That was kind of the biggest reference with this track, was trying to get the biggest sounding drums. And I feel like in an untreated studio space, a lot of times there's you want to minimize reflections and allow people to get the room sounding bigger later. But on this one, he was like, I want the biggest drums possible. So this was a really fun one.
God, it's hard to be innocent when the world keeps showing you it's thick and disaster is imminent. Getting sick of...
If you heard the drums, I have a video of me playing that drum set, and it was it's a crazy sounding kit, but Tommy kept saying crazier, more room. So I ended up putting a microphone in the next room over, the garage. I had a microphone in there. I had I was running a high Z microphone, which is just a dynamic with a 1/4 inch. I was running that into a tape machine and just cranking the input stage to just get the craziest distortion. He was like, more of that, So it was weird. It was the drums themselves, in this corner are decently dry, just because I like giving people more of an option to treat the room how they want. But this was really fun because Tommy really was pushing me to try to get the biggest room sound out of obviously low ceilings and very dead space. So it was cool to see how it turned out, because I was a little worried. I was like, if this isn't working, you live in LA and you have all these dudes that can have giant studios, but he was like, no, man, this sounds awesome. Just tune the snare higher.
I mean, if anyone says tune the snare higher, I'm on board, dude. I mean, I know I work for a big fat snare drum, but It's because you can do that and then you put a big fat snare drum on it. But, let's go on to number 2. And this one's really cool. Also a very drastic change. It's Broken Wings by, is it Caned by Nod?
I think it's Caned by Nod, yeah.
Caned by Nod? Okay, this one's really fun. So
yeah, this is wild.
Yeah, here we go.
Yeah, very Dillinger escape plan right there.
Totally.
Yeah, this record was pretty crazy to make. It's actually, the artist is actually, his name's Cody Jinks. He's like a Texas-based country artist, but he wanted to do a metal record while he was making his country record, so he flew in a Nashville band to make this stuff. It was crazy. I grew up listening to metal and stuff, but I obviously haven't played metal in any sort of commercial context for, forever, really. So my buddy Eddie Spear, who produced this, we tracked it at Sonic Ranch out. It's like an hour south of El Paso.
Oh, so, totally. Very close to where I'm at right now.
Yeah, totally. So same vibe. But yeah, that was my first time at Sonic Ranch, and definitely the first time I've ever tracked double kick on anything. But yeah, it was a crazy experience just being out there, and we rented a couple kits from Blackbird, and that kit ended up being, I believe it was a Radio King that Matt Chamberlain owned.
Oh, wow.
Which is a very interesting choice for a metal album, but we put Remo Black Dots on it, Wide Open, and then I was playing a lot of like Keropes as crashes, but like the 16-inch ones, so they were like really kind of bright, but they weren't blowing out the room or anything. And then all that was tracked to tape, so there was we would learn the songs. Like the artist would come in with a riff and we would arrange it all out, and then we would do 3 takes to no click, all live, and then we would pick the best take, and then that was it. So it was like definitely one of the most challenging recording experiences for me, because nothing straightforward about any of those parts. I kind of had to improvise them and then do them like in the moment,
Yeah. Well, it's cool because literally I would not think that's the same drummer on those 2 records, and I mean that in a complimentary way. Yeah.
I appreciate that. Yeah. This is like fun to kind of go through some of these recordings and kind of see, because like it's sometimes there's a certain element of when you're doing your own work, it's hard to kind of have a objective view of what you do. So it is kind of funny going through all this stuff and seeing how different it all is.
Sure. Yeah. All right. Well, the next one is going to be Slowly, in parentheses, Donnie, by Josh Gilligan and the Donelson Broncos.
Yeah. And that's one of my projects. That's just, that's me and my roommates with our friend Josh. So yeah, that's a good one too.
Here we go.
Caught me at the wrong time. No relying on me now if you can help it. Even at a good time, even on a better day, let's just shelf it.
So the kick sound on this one is, I think it was like a single-headed 20-inch kick drum with a 36-inch marching kick as a woofer. So that's that like puffiness that you're hearing in the kick is the sympathetic ringing from that.
Just feeling what's real. Lost another day, talking who do what before and who can help it.
But yeah, this was engineered at my old house in Nashville. So me and my friends, the Donelson Broncos, we just would remix songs for people. So we'd have people send us acapellas, and then we would. So this is a originally recorded song by Josh that sounds completely different, but we just got his vocal stem and played a different arrangement to this. So it was fun.
On our own again. Maybe take it slowly, just knowing we can disappear right now.
This one was fun for me just because I recorded everything in my studio, and then it got sent off to mix by this guy named Micah Talks, who's an awesome mix engineer in Nashville. So it's cool hearing this recording kind of come out of really what was like a very grungy, like quick recording setup, like not really any headphone cues. I was just kind of on in-ears, and it was all in one room, no isolation. Like I've always really gotten a kick out of trying to get the best sounding recordings out of like very simple, like less mics and stuff. So
yeah. No, that's half the fun of watching your videos too, is like what's your miking technique today?
Totally, yeah. And it changes so much. I feel like, I mean, that's kind of what keeps it interesting for me, and maybe kind of why, like, as I like started pushing more towards self-engineering stuff for remotes, a drum set is such a fun thing to record because there's so many. There's multiple instruments, obviously. It's like snare, kick, tom, cymbals, and they all interact with each other, and there's no isolation, so there's phase issues, which can be cool, and then also like sometimes it can ruin the sound. Sometimes you want to get a really punchy sound with one mic. Sometimes I just upgraded my setup, and now I'm like tracking 16 channels of drums all at once, which is a completely different challenge. But that's been fun.
All right, well let's go to the fourth one, and then we'll go on to your choices. But
cool.
Yeah, Like Wine by the St. John's.
I can't afford being alone anymore.
Do you have a pair of go-to hi-hats? Because you have it seems like you have a lot of like this is vintage like A thing going on that is in most of your videos.
Yeah, those Zildjian, I don't know, they're like the CIE Constantinoples. These aren't my hi-hats. This was at my friend Matt Odemark's studio. He was in Jars of Clay, that Christian rock band in the 90s.
Totally.
So we tracked this at his spot. And yeah, those are just basically 14-inch Constantinoples, which is what I mainly use, but just very light touch on this one, which I feel like that's maybe, if I have something that I like doing more often than not, it's brighter cymbals, but playing them really lightly. Because, obviously, especially in the past 10 years, I feel like starting with maybe like the 24-inch K Light Ride, alternative rock, like everybody was using these big dark cymbals and hitting them really hard because the darker the cymbal, the less you're going to blow out your overheads and your overall drum mix. Yeah. So I've always just gotten a kick out of trying to figure out how to use bright cymbals, but playing them so lightly to where they have that nice cut and kind of what you want out of cymbals without having to worry about the overall drum mix. So I feel like these days when I'm recording, I'm playing so quiet, which is so counterintuitive to like playing live and putting on a show. I'm like here,
Well, that's kind of going back to the 70s thing. Jake Reed was talking about how if you play softer, you can really crank the pre's, and then you get a lot more tone that you don't know is there. And playing lighter can make drums sound way more powerful.
Totally. I mean, yeah, most recording I do is more in that realm. And that was something that I honestly was something that I learned kind of more recently than not. And maybe even something that I shunned for a while of like, oh, everybody wants you to play quiet and crank the pre's because that's just whatever's hip. And then I started doing it and I was like, oh, it's like clear heads versus coated heads, or like it's like any other choice you would make musically. It's just, there's just different things. But I have found that is kind of a cheat code that, or playing with chopsticks, or, I've done that a lot where
really?
You have a broken drum. Oh, totally. Like broken drumstick. If you break it in half and then play with the broken like wood ends, they're kind of, or like I'm sure you've like broken a stick during a show and you didn't notice and the tip fell off, and now you have this like super weak cymbal sound.
Yeah.
But if you took that and played it with really nice preamps that aren't noisy and cranked them up and were playing with that regularly, you're opening up a whole new sound. And I realized that like a lot of it feels like found sounds. And like a lot of experimentation, but yeah, like I feel like that's like a fun thing. Like if anybody ever asked me like, what's something I should try like drum recording wise, I would just say like crank your preamps up to where they're almost hurting your ears, and then play as lightly as you can with chopsticks and record it.
All right, I'll do that. Do you have any? Do you actively? Is your practice for that just playing like that, or do you have any sort of like special technique on the pad or something that like Because that's hard to play with control, but also with soft.
For sure. Yeah, that's definitely something that sounds easier than it is. But when you pick up a stick, a chopstick, it's like you're used to having rebound and certain ways that a stick behaves on drums or cymbals, and then all of a sudden it's completely taken away. But I guess the only control thing I would think is like maybe an exercise that I've always liked. I don't know if we're allowed to talk about drum exercises on here or not.
No nerding out, man.
Start floating drum notation.
Exactly.
An old drum teacher of mine from Portland, his name's Steve Nister, he taught me this exercise that kind of like helped me a lot with like control. And it's just to set your metronome at like 60 BPM or something painfully slow and just play paradiddles as light as possible over a bossa nova beat. And then start doing, so like right, left, left, left. But at like literally like with your metronome on your phone app or whatever, like with no in-ears or anything, just as light as you can for like 10 minutes, and then start adding accents and kind of go down the grid of each partial of the 16th note. And I feel like that kind of helped me because the paradiddle, you have, it's single strokes and double strokes in the most concise form. So it kind of helps you with, because that to me, like playing with dynamics is being able to play quietly, but be able to still differentiate accents. That's kind of what keeps the feel cool. Otherwise, you could just turn down a mix, But it's the difference in dynamics, especially when it's quiet, that's when you can really notice. So
I definitely don't focus on the elementary stuff, and I would put paradiddle as an elementary thing, but
totally, me too.
Or even just single strokes. Like I was thinking about it the other day. Like when was the last time I literally just practiced single strokes? And what do I use 90% of the time? Single strokes.
Yeah, I think that single strokes are probably the most underrated, like rudiment. Because I guess it is technically a rudiment, but
yeah,
I mean it's the first one. But yeah, I mean. That's the thing is like I find now when I practice it is mostly just the most basic things, which maybe is just because as we start working and stuff, a lot of the practice is preparation and recording and doing other stuff like that. So I always find myself like, all right, I'm going back to these old exercises that I worked on and trying to keep the control rather than learning a new thing. But
100%. Well, let's continue going down the history of you, and let's just go into your choices. So the first one is the album is Bright Side's Life. It came out in 1976, and that's Pat Metheny on is the artist, and Bob Moses is the drummer. And the song we're going to choose, or that you chose, is the titular track, Bright Side's Life. So let me just go ahead and play that, and then we can talk all you want about what tickled your fancy about this one.
The right hand. It like almost goes into a groove, but then it doesn't.
Yeah, what a tease.
Yeah, I guess the reason why I picked this one is because, like, when I started drumming and everything, my middle school band director really was trying to hit me to jazz as opposed to all the metal that I was listening to. He was like, because he was a metalhead as well, but he always was pushing me to like, hey, but also check out this stuff that, is worth learning. So I picked this song specifically because this was something like I had like a playlist that I would listen to when I was mowing lawns for my summer jobs.
Hell yeah, okay.
And I remember I would be listening to this stuff that I had no business listening to something this complex. And I like didn't know where the downbeat was or really what was happening. So I feel like this is a good example of just like kind of maybe like starting in the deep end as far as like what you're checking out musically.
Yeah.
Yeah, Bob Moses was an important drummer to me because I ended up actually taking a lesson from him. He lives, I'm not sure if he still lives in Quincy, Massachusetts, but that's just south of Boston where I was going to college. And yeah, one of my drum teachers in Portland was like, hey man, if you ever get a chance, go get a lesson with Bob Moses. Like, it'll probably be 8 hours long, and he's going to teach you everything he possibly can, and it'll be kind of like a spiritual experience, which mine ended up being about 6 hours, but he really liked talking on, I guess, the idea of like where you resolve phrases within a musical context. And while I'm not really, playing jazz much anymore, even though that's kind of what I came up playing, I've always really that's something that stuck with me, is the ability to think of musical phrases, not necessarily in terms of 4 or 8 or 16 bar, increments, or even verse chorus, but more just thinking about the way certain things flow. And that's something that I, obviously as a kid mowing lawns, listening to that stuff, it's I didn't know where the downbeat was because it was so fluid. And that's definitely something that I try to still retain in my playing, is just the ability to not obscure things on purpose, but just if a phrase or a certain melody or lyric, lends something to kind of gloss over it. I like having that ability, or at least being able to think that way.
That's sick. I really don't know much about Bob Moses as a drummer and his history, so I'm excited to go down that rabbit hole for sure.
Yeah, he's definitely a really good one. I'm not sure if it's still on YouTube, but also something else about Bob Moses. When I was in middle school, I would get home from school, and I would spend about an hour every day. Right when I got home, I would just go on YouTube and just look up different jazz drummers and just watch these old archive footages of Art Blakey or Elvin or whoever. Yeah. But there was this video of Bob Moses playing with Gary Burton, who's a vibraphone player, and it's at some festival in Germany or something, and he's playing on Vista lights, and he's playing traditional grip, but he's just hitting so hard and doing all this very Steve Gadd linear hi-hat stuff, but kind of more in that flowing way. And I remember just watching that video, and it was a combination of the Vista lights, which I associated with rock and roll. And I just remember I would watch that video and have no idea what was going on, and I would just keep watching it and just, so I just remember from an early age, Bob Moses really stuck out to me.
All right, well, number 2, and the album is Free For All, came out in 1964. Speaking of, it is Art Blakey and the Jazz Messengers, and the song, again, is Free For All. And the drummer is, of course, Art Blakey, so let's just go ahead and play that.
That's also one of my favorite sounding ride cymbals ever. I don't know what it was, but that ride cymbal, it's perfectly dark, but not too much.
Dude, totally blown out snare roll. That's awesome.
Blown out snare roll, and then right back down. The dynamics were amazing.
Sounds so rad.
Yeah, his buzz rolls were, I still haven't figured out how to do that, really. I think I picked this one just something in the jazz world, just because I remember when I heard this record, it was Art Blakey traditionally played hard bop, which is less broken up. The hi-hat was always on 2 and 4 for the most part, and this is more stepping into modern, or at least modal jazz, where you can hear he's comping with the hi-hat. The ride cymbal beat isn't just ding digga ding digga ding. It's he's interacting with the ride cymbal also, which is something that Jack DeJohnette, Tony Williams, those guys kind of branched off and started doing that. And I think the reason why this one I would pick this record out of any other jazz record that I listen to is just because it's crazy. Art Blakey already had such a defined voice, but he wasn't really scared to try something new or foreign, I guess, to him. And I've always been drawn to recordings that feel like someone's right on the edge of their seat.
Yeah.
There's no hesitation. All the drum fills are the drums sound like they're rock drums. They're tuned low. He's hitting super hard, and there's no. It doesn't feel like there's any sort of scholastic nature about what he's doing. He's just playing from a very risk-oriented state, which I feel does that make sense?
100%. 100%.
I feel like maybe like studying jazz for years, I was always a little bit off-put by how many rules there were. And, well, you can't rush the song, and you can't tune your drums low, and you have to do certain things. And he's, you know, like, he's a legend, and the song speeds up drastically the entire time. He's rushing, he's playing way too loud. And I just remember, like, being like, oh, so you can express yourself. Like, this is not just a scholastic music at all. It's just, that was the side of it that I knew until I heard this record, and then I realized there was just this whole other side.
Is this live?
I mean, they're recording it. I think it's just at the Blue Note Studios, like Rudy Van Gelder's studio.
Okay. I only asked because I heard someone go woo a second ago.
They're like yelling. They're yelling at each other. They're having fun, you know. Yeah, that to me was like kind of, because I don't know, like I feel like there's certain things that like within childhood that you do a lot. Like as a kid, I was on swim team, and like I never want to get in a pool again. Like there's certain things that you did a lot, and jazz was one of those things to where now I'm not as, I still love, I listen to jazz all the time, but I associate it a little bit with like rules and like the scholastic side of music as opposed to freedom and expression. And that record to me is like, if I want to show somebody a jazz record, like that's one that's just completely like, there's no holds barred with that one.
That's sick. Yeah.
Yeah.
Art Blakey, man.
Yep. Art Blakey.
All right. Number 3. This is You're So Beautiful, the album, and the release year was 1970. And this is Charles Wright and the Watts 103rd Street Rhythm Band. And the song is What Can You Bring Me? And this is actually a friend of the podcast. We had James Gadsden on the show before.
Oh,
one
nice.
of my favorite episodes. Yeah. And of course, James Gadsden. Well, the funny thing about that one is it was in the current format where I was like, hey, man, so obviously you're Sir James Gadsden. I want to know what, built you into you. And so instead of, I think he misunderstood it, bless his heart, but he sent back like songs that he had recorded throughout his career, thinking that he would talk about himself through that. And I was like, that's even better. So he like dissected, Use Me and like all those things.
So cool. I gotta listen to that,
yeah, it's a really, really fun one. And you could tell I'm like super nervous the whole time. But he was a huge sweetheart. So it was awesome. But yeah, the GOAT. So James Gadsden, and he did not talk about this song. So I'm excited to listen to it.
This is all about right hand. Yeah, so this might be the song that I've listened to the most in my entire life.
Really?
And it's
okay.
because this has been a song that I've practiced drums to for years and years and years. Because it's so fast. I mean, if you do a tap to it, I could do it right now, but I don't want to mess with my computer. But it's around like 110 or something, 16th notes on the hi-hat the entire time. He never hits a crash. He never moves away from this the entire time, which, is a very technical thing, but it also feels amazing. And he's not just doing that. He has all the ghost notes, like, his signature feel of like kind of the way he cracks the snare backwards instead of lifting the stick. He kind of, does that. Like you can almost visualize the way he's playing it. But there's this guy on YouTube. His name's Mark. I looked for the video and I couldn't find it, but I remember it was just like in the early days of me looking at drummers on YouTube. He did this "What Can You Bring Me" hi-hat challenge where, and I don't even think a bunch of people did it, but that's how I got hip to this song. And I remember watching it and going, oh, that's easy. Like that song's not that fast. And then I tried to play along with it, and like by the second verse, if even that, like my hand was falling off. And it's not even it's not loud or anything like, because some stuff is like taxing in that way, but this is like finesse. Like he's barely hitting the hi-hats and he's just trucking along with, so that was something that like was definitely like a lot of that old funk stuff, like those guys, like, you know, Zigaboo from the Meters and, you know, Clyde and all those guys, like they all had chops. And I feel like that's something that stuck, you know, with me from a, you know, very early age, checking out all those records is like, although they were playing parts and it wasn't super drum, you know, there wasn't like tons of drum solos like the way in jazz there's more of that. Those guys all needed to have a really high level of technical facility to play funky at certain tempos, you know. So that's definitely something that stuck with me as far as like, because I feel like sometimes, especially in Nashville, there's a certain level of you know, there's almost this chops versus feel mentality, and the idea that if you have chops or you can play, you know, if you study the instrument in a technical way, that you might not be you might not have as much feel or make choices to make a song feel good, or vice versa. The idea of, oh, I'm a pocket guy, I don't do all that other stuff. And I always loved all those old funk guys because they all came from jazz backgrounds probably, and they had that facility, but they used it in a way where they used their technique to make the song feel even better and, you know, make the drum parts iconic, you know, very effortlessly, you know?
Yeah, effortlessly. I mean, that's, I tried to crack the code with James when he was on. I was like, so man, like, how do you get that 16th note feel? And of course, he's just like, relax. I was like, I'm not even going to press on that. That's probably, yeah, you're right. Yeah. I'm going to write that down. Goodbye, sir.
Yep, thank you.
It's that easy.
Yeah, I mean, you know, there's like videos of him playing with Bill Withers, and he just has the biggest smile on his face. He's playing probably some of the funkiest drums ever, and looks like so calm. And I know I don't look like that when I'm, you know, focusing or whatever. And I think that's that's a good takeaway. Is like music should feel like steady and easy sometimes, depending on what you're playing. But James Gadson.
It was as easy as that. Like, that's his mindset, and it's like, okay, I want to capture that. I'm overthinking it way too much, which is my MO. But, you know.
Right.
All right, so number 4, it's
all right.
Darren King. We're trying to figure out the schedule to get him on the podcast, but I would love to I'm really excited for that. But yes,
that
so
would be awesome.
The band is Mute Math. Album is Mute Math. It's their self-titled album. Came out in 2006, and the song is, oh my God, I've worn this song out for sure. The song's Typical. Yeah. And of course the drummer, like I just said, is Darren King. So let's just play some Mute Math.
That's kind of what got it for me with Darren, is how he made drum parts very melodic and catchy while still the song, you know, this song is still like, you know, a hit. Like, it feels like a hit song, and it was, you know, at the time.
Yeah. Well, also, I just remember hearing this for the first time, and he's like, the cymbals are washy, but it still has this like very controlled, small feel to it. If I'm, you know.
I mean, even just talking about recording drums, like, I feel like a lot of people, especially in Nashville, just because Mute Math was, you know, based in Nashville, I believe, or at least a lot of them lived here. I feel like a lot of us have been chasing like the Mute Math sound for. I mean, this is an old record now, which is crazy to think about because it doesn't sound old at all.
It's 16 years, my God.
Yeah, crazy. I don't know Darren, but I know a lot of people that work with him, and they've all been like, he really is that good, and he really sounds that good, which is always such a cool thing to hear, you know, from like a hero. Like, I remember listening to this stuff when I was like in middle school and just being absolutely blown away, especially at the time being somebody that maybe was jazz biased to where, you know, rock music isn't technical and those guys probably aren't good, just in a very, you know, like fixed mindset. And listening to this stuff, I was like, oh, this guy rips, but he's making musical choices.
Yeah.
This whole album is just textbook good drum tones and engineering and mixing. And when Darren King kind of became popular in the scene, like, everybody started tuning their snare drums lower because of just how these records sounded, you know? as far as like relating it to my personal development, you know, I became very fixated on jazz, and that was kind of what I was studying. And obviously, like, that's always a good play. But I maybe was missing out on a lot of stuff that was more contemporary and backbeat oriented. That was, you know, more modern, because I just didn't really. I made the connection between jazz and then the funk stuff because it was kind of in the same era, and it kind of, you know, there's a lot of like, you know, like back and forth between those two styles at that time. But listening to a more modern record, I wasn't really doing it at the time, because in my head I was like, well, they're not playing that many notes and there's no cool fills or whatever. And then when I heard this, it kind of, I feel like this changed my thinking a little bit, of realizing that you can, you know, play drums in a way that, you know, is gratifying as a drummer, and you feel like you're creating parts that are simultaneously serving a song while also inspiring somebody to want to pick up drumsticks. And that to me was really powerful, because it kind of did both for me. It also just rocks. It's just a great record.
It's also just fucking good. So, yeah, I mean, obviously, like I said at the beginning, I consider you the epitome of like a modern contemporary drummer that's making cool sounds that like are exciting. So I don't think your route saying, you know, you missed out on some stuff at the beginning, it got you here. So I think that's rad, man. But
thanks.
Yeah, all right. So number 5, and I mean, yeah, again, I agree. This whole record sounds great. But number 5, Rocket Juice and the Moon, and it came out in 2012, the most modern record of your choices. Yep. And the artist is Rocket Juice and the Moon. Song choice is Benko, and the drummer's Tony Allen, the late Tony Allen. So let's just check it out.
So yeah, that's Flea. Flea's playing Flea from the Red Hot Chili Peppers is playing bass, and then Damon Albarn from Blur and the Gorillaz is the other guy. So this band is a trio. So Damon's playing all the synths, and then Tony Allen's playing drums. So it's kind of like a rock super group. It's pretty weird.
I've never heard of this band. Yeah, it's crazy.
Bright cymbals being played really quietly.
Yeah, super bright now that you point it out.
Yeah. But he, you know, when he plays hi-hat, he's on top of the cymbal a lot of the times, and he's playing, it's kind of like James Gadsden. He's playing really light and relaxed, and that's why it kind of has that feel. This song's kind of sneaky because there's a bar of 3 at the end of the phrase, so it rolls over. So this one always messed me up because Afrobeat, you know, was kind of like a response to like a lot of the James Brown stuff, and I think it originated in Lagos, Tony Allen was Fella's drummer. So Fella's kind of like the most popular Afrobeat artist. So they would get these James Brown records, and they would hear the backbeat, the snare. They would hear the high-pitched snare as the one. So a lot of Afrobeat grooves actually start with the snare on the downbeat, and then the kick where the snare would be. So I remember that always tickled my ear about Tony, is kind of how backwards it felt to me, but still felt really good.
Yeah, that's interesting.
But this track is cool because there is a split bar. There's a bar of 3 at the end of it. He kind of goes back and forth of both feels. So it's almost like a weird study of Afrobeat drumming in one track, because it does flip at the end, you know?
That's really cool, yeah.
Yeah, for the longest time, I would listen to this record in my car. I think I was in high school at the time. And I just couldn't figure out where the downbeat was, because I knew that sometimes he would play the snare on the downbeat, and sometimes it would be the kick. And so but since the phrase kept flipping over, I got so confused. So I like listened to this track so much, like trying to figure out what was going on.
Yeah.
And it just kind of ends weird. They just.
Are we done, boys? Yeah.
That's funny. It's an interesting record, and also like I feel like near the end of his life, Tony got to play on a lot of really cool records. Like a lot of people got hip to him, and he did get to play on a lot of modern stuff, which I feel like is a really lucky thing to be able to hear somebody that was part of such a pivotal style, like I guess in the 70s, and then still be doing it, but now we get to hear him like in a really nice studio with really nice microphones, and you get to hear kind of like that, like someone's voice in different, you know, iterations is like really, really special. But yeah, Tony Allen. I don't know why I just got on it was like in high school and I got on this Tony Allen kick and was just trying to learn all of his grooves and stuff. But yeah, definitely something about his touch on the instrument also that was like really important to me.
Yeah, I could definitely hear that touch in your playing for sure.
Cool,
so
thanks.
Yeah, and I remember I was looking it up. Stella Mozgawa used his album Black Voices from '99. The song Asiko was one of her choices, and also a great record from Tony Allen. Well, I do want to give a few shout-outs to your honorable mentions, and this is a drummer I would love to have on the show, but Steve from American Football.
Oh, yeah.
And the song is Never Meant. I was lucky enough to see them maybe 2 or 3 years ago. They were on like a reunion tour or something, but I got to see them live, and whenever he was like, it was featuring him, the audience was just going crazy.
Great sounding kit too. Like,
Totally.
Open.
I love that on that backbeat. It almost sounds like he opens up the hi-hat with it. It's kind of that, Roger Taylor kind of vibe.
It comes after it. I love.
Yep.
Yeah, I always love that part. Yeah, I feel like American Football, for people that like kind of knew who they were, because they weren't a huge band and they kind of developed a cult following. Like, it was such a good crossover of like kind of the Midwest emo stuff that everybody was listening to, and I was always like, I like it, but I don't really get it. And then I heard this and I was like, oh, it's in an odd time. The drummer's really good, and I'm a sad kid and I relate to it. So to me, it was like the perfect like, oh, I'm gonna be listening to this band for a really long time. And then I realized they weren't actually a band anymore. And then I was like, oh, cool. I'm cool for knowing about this record. But they're back together now, I think. So that's cool.
Them in Neutral Milk Hotel. It's like, I'm cool for knowing this band.
Right.
Yeah, Steve, if you're listening, hit me back,
come.
man.
Yeah, seriously.
Steve, come. All right, so the next one is Pedro the Lion, David Bazan. And let's just play it. The song's Second Best from the album Control.
Yep. This is a bright cymbal being hit really hard.
Yes. The opposite of everything we've talked about.
Yep, this is the opposite for sure. This is... And the engineering and stuff, I guess I picked this just because, obviously, I love Pedro the Lion. I feel like a lot of people from the Northwest kind of grew up with David Bazan and Pedro the Lion. But I was always so stoked that he played drums on this. And I think he made this record at a studio, for the most part, by himself. So he was engineering everything. And so to me, that was like kind of like a good example of a self-engineered drummer, like pretty early on.
Yeah.
But... yeah, just the feel, like, it's such a slow tempo, but it never feels like anything's rushing, like, yeah, drum tones are great.
And I love David, his solo stuff and Pedro, a lot of double drumming stuff, and it's just a little bit of variation on both sides.
Totally.
Are you familiar with Sean Lane?
Yes, not super familiar, but I know of him because I know he played with Pedro later on. I looked him up at some point, and he made like a bicycle, like a percussion thing out of a bicycle. So cool. Yeah,
I also want to get Sean on. But yeah, Sean, shout out to Sean. He lives in Seattle, which is where I'm from, Seattle area, and I have a Rogers holiday kit that I bought from him when he was working at Trading Musician. But great drummer, and he's the perfect drummer to play with David.
Yeah, so good.
And... well, awesome, man. I mean, that's your Big Fat 7-ish.
Yeah, totally.
So if people do, I mean, go follow you. Aksel Coe, is it Aksel Coe Drums or is it just Aksel Coe on Instagram?
Aksel Coe Drums. That's my personal Insta. Yep.
If people do want to reach out to you to have you remote record on their tracks, what's the best way to get a hold of you and all that jazz?
Just you can just send me a direct message on Instagram. That's usually the best way. I have a website, akselco.com, but I don't think anybody really goes on there. So Instagram's usually the best way. That's the way we're all connected.
I know. I have a website too, and I don't think I mean, it's there, I guess, for Google, the
Just
algorithm.
in case.
Yeah,
Right,
yeah, exactly.
The Google algorithm. But yeah, Instagram's a good way. Tell me my snare drum sounds bad in the comments.
Do you get a lot of comments of people saying that?
No, not at all.
Okay. I was like, a lot of idiots then. My God.
No, I feel like the drum community, like, genuinely, like, I was kind of nervous to do this just because I feel like sometimes talking about something that, like, everybody, like, I'm sure people listen to this that, like, know way more than me, and I've been doing this way longer, but I feel like the drum community in general is, like, very supportive, and we all, like, are excited to learn about stuff. So I was just happy to be a part of this and kind of, like, try to dissect and kind of go back in time to try to think, like, oh yeah, what are the things that if I had to, like, condense, because obviously we all listen to so many different things, but
yeah,
it's fun to try to condense your influences and stuff. So this was really fun.
Yeah, man, well, I'll tell you, I've talked to so many drummers. You had a lot of unique points. And, I mean, I feel the same way every time I do a podcast. I'm basically exposing how much I don't know by hosting these shows. Because I know, like, maybe 10% of what drummers bring on here. So
I mean, that's a good way to learn it, though. I mean,
it
totally.
is, yeah. All right, man. Well, I will talk to you later, dude. This was fun.
Dude, thanks so much. Yeah, thanks for having me.
Peace, dude.
All right, peace.
And that's the show. If you're listening on a platform that allows ratings and reviews, do that. It helps more people find the show, so it'll get bigger and better, and hopefully I'll have a chance to sell out one day. But you'll be an OG listener that can brag to all your friends. Anyways, why don't you go and check us out at bigfatsnaredrum.com and follow us on all the socials. Just search for Big Fat Snare Drum, and you will find us. The show is edited in part using iZotope RX Audio Editor. It's amazing, so go check that out at iZotope.com. And thanks again to Gunnar Olsen for the theme music. Bye.